John Tyler as president. John Tyler, a Virginia aristocrat, was the first vice president to take over in midterm. Becoming president after William Henry Harrison's death in April 1841. So a month after taking office, William Henry Harrison passed away, and so the presidency went to the vice president, John Tyler. Now, it wasn't clearly stated how the presidential duties and powers would pass over to the vice president, if the vice president would just get those powers but still be vice president, or if the vice president would become the president. And so John Tyler immediately took the oath of office as president and moved into the White House and declared himself the president so that there wouldn't be any kind of constitutional crisis or people trying to figure out how things were supposed to be. Now later, the 25th Amendment would clarify everything, but at the time that John Tyler took office, it wasn't clear what should happen, and so he just quickly swooped in and made sure everyone knew that he was the president, not just vice president performing some presidential duties. So from April 1841 until the end of the term that William Henry Harrison would have served, John Tyler was president. Even though he was the Whig candidate, Tyler opposed almost all of the Whig agenda. So John Tyler hadn't really been picked to be president. He had been picked to be vice president running with William Henry Harrison because Tyler would attract some votes from the southern area. And so he was on the ticket as vice president to attract some votes. Neither of the major parties had actually wanted to elect Tyler to be president. Tyler didn't agree with the Democratic Party, and he also didn't agree with all of the Whig Party, or all of the Whig Party's ideals. And so he opposed almost all of the Whigs' agenda. And the Whigs were excited to have gotten a candidate into office with William Henry Harrison, and were very unhappy at seeing that now this vice president wasn't going to accomplish any of the things they thought they might get accomplished during this four-year presidential term. Henry Clay hoped to dominate Tyler in Congress, but his attempts to create a third national bank and to improve infrastructure in the West were both vetoed by Tyler. So Henry Clay thought, I've been in Congress a while, this guy doesn't have a lot of support because he wasn't really elected to be president, he just kind of got there by accident. And so he thought he would be able to push a lot through still during Congress. But Tyler used his presidential power to veto and didn't allow a third national bank to be created or for there to be a lot of infrastructure improvement in the West. Tyler's presidency was also fraught with conflict with the British. Tyler's predecessor, Martin Van Buren, had also had to deal with conflict with the British along the American-Canadian border. Eventually, in the Webster-Ashburton Treaty of 1842, most of these issues were resolved. Fugitives were exchanged. The border of Maine, which was one of the border states, was set at the St. John River, and it was established that the British could no longer search American ships. So after a lot of skirmishes with rebels along the American-Canadian border, this Webster-Ashburton Treaty in 1842 cleared up a lot of that. But Tyler did get his fair share of conflict with the British, as did his predecessor. Tyler was a firm believer in manifest destiny. And Western expansion. So he may not have wanted to improve the infrastructure in the West, but he did favor Western expansion. He did favor the United States growing and becoming stronger by expanding. And so during his last days in office, he finally succeeded in securing the annexation of the Republic of Texas into the United States. Now, James K. Polk, his successor, actually got to be the president whenever Texas was annexed, but John Tyler actually did all the groundwork for that and got the agreement in place before he officially left office. Now, by the time the 1844 election year came around, Tyler had alienated both major parties and was unable to get reelected to the presidency. Now, John Tyler actually enjoyed being president, and he wanted to run again and be president again, but he had already alienated the Democratic Party whenever he sided with the Whigs, and he'd alienated the Whig Party by not helping their agenda along. He, in fact, opposed almost all of their agenda. So by alienating the two major parties, he was unable to secure the nomination to either of those parties and was unable to secure enough electoral votes to ever become the president again in any of the smaller parties. Like there were the two major parties, and then there were some smaller offshoot parties, but he was still unable to get elected to presidency after alienating those two major parties. Without a major party's support, it was going to be very difficult for a candidate to get elected to president, to be able to have enough electoral votes to have the majority in Congress and be able to actually become the president. So John Tyler became president as accident. After a month as vice president, his predecessor, William Henry Harrison, he died in April 1841, and so John Tyler became president. This was not clearly explained in the Constitution how this transition should happen, but John Tyler swooped in and said, "I'm president, I'm going to take the oath, I'm going to move into the White House, I'm going to have all the powers that the president had because I will be the president." So he kind of set that precedent that later got ironed out in the 25th Amendment so that there were specifics laid out for the future. He was nominated on the Whig Party ticket, but he opposed almost all Whig agenda items, and he had already opposed the Democratic Party, and so by the end of his term, he had alienated both major parties. He didn't let Henry Clay push him around in Congress. He ended up using his presidential veto power to keep a third national bank from being created and to prevent a lot of infrastructure improvement in the West. But he was a pro-expansion kind of person. He believed in manifest destiny. He wanted Western expansion. He just didn't want to spend money setting up all the infrastructure right now. He did manage to secure the annexation of the Republic of Texas during his last days of office, and he did have to deal with some conflict with the British, but all of that, or most of that at least, was resolved during the Webster-Ashburton Treaty of 1842. So John Tyler became president by accident, and he wasn't able to get reelected after alienating both major parties during his presidential term.